Well, the Democrats have sold the country out. They're afraid of this on the right. They don't have protection details. They don't want to end up shot at, dead, the target of a speeding car coming at them, someone popping out of the weeds. They're scared. The country has been taken over by the insurrectionists, literally. Somehow they think that they can control Trump and his accolades. They think that in 2 years the midterms will flip the fortunes and they will be back in power after the country sees what they've done. But they have the nerve to get on visual media and talk about how they did the patriotic thing. They did the peaceful transfer of power. The peaceful transfer of power has returned. Lawrence O'Donnell did a whole speech on the peaceful transfer of power is back. You know, Constitution be damned. The Constitution is what it is. It says what it says. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is clear. It is self-executing. The Supreme Court has said the bar to office activates on conduct and nothing more. If you take an oath and you violate that oath or the Constitution or congressional laws, the bar to office is upon you and nothing more. No charge, no court, no trial, no need for proof beyond that you did the conduct and nothing more. That means you are now a constitutionally ineligible candidate, no more different than if you were not 35, you were not natural born, and you were not a resident for 14 years. So the next step is quo warranto. If people will get together and donate the funds to get it filed. Upon that ruling, upon Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which does not require legislation because the D.C. District Federal Court already has jurisdiction in quo warranto over Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. The court can issue a ruling that Trump is an illegitimate president, and in essence, the appeal will be to Congress for the required amnesty vote. Let's start with Glenn Kirshner. Here is Glenn Kirshner with a video titled January 6th should be disqualification day for adjudicated insurrectionist Trump. But will it be? No, it won't. He's stuck on adjudicated insurrectionist. Posted January 2nd. And we don't even have to launch into the video, but let's start with some legal basics. A court without jurisdiction to decide a matter that persists and continues produces a null and void order. That's just Law 101. You can't go to court for a parking ticket and get charged with murder. Mr. Trump incited an insurrection. The insurrection did not continue. It did not succeed. A state court does not have jurisdiction to decide a federal matter. That's what the Supreme Court said. They didn't say it clearly, but you have to understand the law to understand what they've said. They're right. They went on and acted like there's no law, no court that handles it. The Supreme Court is wrong. The Binkley brief showed and proved that the D.C. District Federal Court is where the case should have been filed. You can file it in the D.C. District Federal Court to hear the issue of mandamus from Colorado, because that court could have determined he was an adjudicated insurrectionist. Kirshner's stuck on this adjudicated insurrectionist. He is not, and it doesn't matter if he was. Because the standard for the bar to office is simply the conduct. You don't need to get an order. You don't need to get a ruling for the bar to office to attach to the conduct. Well, but the conduct has to be described, and it has to be clear, and it has to be something that violates federal law. It's more akin to the rebellion route. I keep saying that. What happened on January 6, 2021 was Trump attempted to rebel against Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, to stay in power past 4 years without being lawfully reelected. He tried a fake elector scheme. It had been planned for months in advance. And that is what is the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation. Not the fact that Trump attempted to incite an insurrection, that he sent a mob to the Capitol. And Kirshner's stuck on that. So let's listen to just a few minutes of what he's got to say. But it's irrelevant and wrong.
Well, friends, if we cared about or chose to remain loyal to the text of the Constitution, then by all rights, January 6th should be Trump disqualification day.
Yes, correct, except you've got the wrong text of the Constitution. The text of the Constitution is rebellion against the Constitution of the United States. And again, rebellion is defined at 18 U.S.C. 2383. And it defines insurrection and rebellion. Rebellion is defined as resistance to any authority cited in the Constitution itself, such as an article, section, and clause, or congressional laws. That's rebellion. That's what the definition is of rebellion. Insurrection isn't defined really. It's loosely defined as incitement an urge to overthrow, etc. You can go read it yourself. So, Kirshner's off to the wrong start.
But do we really expect it to be? Let's talk about that. Because justice...
Let's zip somewhere else.
Of course, we saw that in the Trump fake elector scheme last time he tried to steal a presidential election in 2020, but that doesn't really apply this time. Or two, if the vote of one or more...
Actually, that is what applies this time. That is what the conduct is that triggered the bar to office. If you just read the Trump v. Anderson ruling, the Supreme Court clearly says it in one sentence. Section 3, unlike any other part of the 14th Amendment, prescribes conduct of individuals. If after taking a qualifying oath, you decide to violate that oath and duty or law of the United States, you are barred from holding office again. It just prescribes conduct and nothing more. That means if you do the conduct, the bar attaches. I mean, it's just really clear, but everybody blows past it. And now, Kirshner's off to the wrong analysis.
Electors was not regularly given. A vote for a candidate disqualified by the Constitution is plainly in accordance with the normal use of words, not regularly given.
Now, he's reading from the Hill article written by the two ex-law clerks of Justice Potter Stewart. Kirshner and Mycelis and others. They just like to read you what other people have written, and they're not even understanding what they're reading. The not regularly given means constitutionally ineligible. You can't vote for a constitutionally ineligible candidate. And a candidate is constitutionally ineligible if they trigger the bar to office. The bar to office is triggered, as I previously just stated, upon conduct. Supreme Court said so. First paragraph of Trump v. Anderson. Then they didn't use the phrase again, and they went on talking about how a state cannot determine the federal question of insurrection. And that's where you stop saying adjudicated insurrectionist. It has no value. It's a null and void determination.
For engaging in insurrection is no different from disqualification based on other constitutional requirements, such as age, citizenship from birth, and 14 years residency in the United States.
Correct. Not going to read it again. You're welcome to go and listen to his whole spiel. But it doesn't matter how many times he reads something someone else wrote. If he can't interpret it in a way that is meaningful, it's of no value. What Kirshner needs to say is, this article describes how conduct attaches the bar to office. His conduct already attached the bar to office. Not only the Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 violation on January 6, 2021 with the fake elector scheme, etc., but there are at least 20 other such instances violations of the Emoluments Clause and making money off of foreign governments and all kind of things that Trump has done previously, including the Haitian pets and dogs eating, lie. That violated 18 U.S.C. 241 because it threatened, intimidated, harassed, certain people. Commonly, collectively known as racism. Go read 18 U.S.C. 241. The way Jack Smith used 18 U.S.C. 241 as voting rights, that was never going to fly. It was an after-the-fact, never going to fly application of threaten, harass, oppress, intimidate. It just wasn't going to fly. But the Haitian eating pets claim, that was specifically designed to oppress, threaten, etc. Let's zip past what he's talking about.
Now, here is the procedure that would be involved if members of Congress decided to object to certifying the Electoral College count. To make an objection under the Count Act requires a petition signed by 20% of the members of each House. Then, if the objection is sustained by majority vote in each House, the vote is not counted, and the number of votes required to be elected is...
There's a problem with that because Section 3 of the 14th Amendment allows for no such agreement to enforce it. It's on the constitutional provision of the ECRA of 2022. He should say that. He doesn't know that. He doesn't realize that. You can't predicate the enforcement of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment based on a group of people voting to enforce it. It's just lunacy. And for other objections, maybe that flies. But for Section 3 of the 14th Amendment-based objection, does not. So that's off to the wrong start. 20%, or it says 1/5 in the ECRA of 2022, same thing. The problem is a simple majority is not what sustains the objection, and it doesn't sustain the objection. It takes a 2/3 majority to overcome the objection. The objection is self-sustaining. It attaches on the conduct. The bar to office attaches on the conduct. So this would be describing the vote to remove the disability, not to sustain it. Kirshner doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's sad. Let's zip past this.
Reduced by the that article of impeachment onto the Senate for a trial, and the Senate found him guilty by a significant majority vote. That again,
he's back on this again. Second impeachment again. Second impeachment has no value in that the Senate didn't have a trial because Justice Roberts walked out. The best they could have done legally was a resolution. It matters not because the incitement to insurrection charge of impeachment attached the bar to office because his conduct attached the bar to office. At that point, it doesn't matter. What the Senate does. If he doesn't get a 2/3 majority vote to acquit him, then he's only halfway there to relieving the disability. You know, when people need to understand the Constitution, they can't because they don't work with it every day.
And included some Republican senators.
Zip past this.
The officer. When I left the Army and joined the Department of Justice, I took that oath again. I swore to support and defend the Constitution against...
How nice, but Trump never took an oath. Or he could have been kept out of office the first time, period. Based on his racism and prior court cases. But America doesn't have a backbone to enforce its own laws. Let's go to the end.
All enemies, foreign and domestic, happen is politicians should rise up, should respect their oath of office, and should vote that an adjudicated insurrectionist is disqualified from holding office again.
Well, they can't vote that an adjudicated insurrectionist is disqualified because he's not an adjudicated insurrectionist because the order is null and void. They can vote that a person who was in rebellion to the Constitution as to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 cannot hold office again. They can vote that already is in place and that a vote needs to be called to relieve his disability of the bar to office. Oh boy. When you're wrong and you have a platform like this, you're not doing America any favors. Let's go to the Mark Thompson show where Jessica Denson, who is not a lawyer, has planned a march, or it should be going on right now. Don't know how successful it's going to be. A march is ridiculous. And she's stuck on the adjudicated insurrectionist also. You know, Trump is a wonder of misdirect. He's now the candidate with the most votes to be certified the winner. But he is not the president-elect because he's constitutionally ineligible. He would not become the president-elect until the vote to remove the disability of the bar to office is taken and he wins. The only way that would happen is if a good number of Democrats vote to remove his disability of the bar to office. Here is a history lesson, Mickey Mouse type explanation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And he never answers the question that he poses, why Congress can but won't invoke the 14th Amendment. An explanation. His explanation at the end is because it doesn't apply to presidents and vice presidents. That's his summary. I'm not going to play any of this. You're welcome to go look it up yourself. It was posted January 6th. There's the URL at the top. This guy cannot be an attorney, but he is trying to dispense legal advice. That's not smart. The problem is he needs to read the Trump v. Anderson ruling, specifically page 8, 9, 10, and 11. On page 8, there's a reference to footnote 2, which shows how Section 3 of the 14th Amendment can be used. His whole argument is that president and vice president isn't listed, but there is the catch-all of other officers. This has been well settled. Nobody has brought this up again, including the Supreme Court. On page 10, bottom of page 10, top of page 11, the Supreme Court specifically says that Section 3 activates on conduct. After taking the qualifying oath of office, if you engage in activity that violates that oath of office, the bar to office attaches. Nothing more. That means Trump is constitutionally ineligible. As they said in the first paragraph, actually it's the third paragraph, but the first paragraph of the first section at the bottom, that he's constitutionally ineligible. They dance all around how states cannot do this, and that's fine. States cannot do this, but they do not say that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment does not apply to president or vice president, and they do not say that Congress can't use it as an objection in the electoral count. Now, the reason why they won't use it, they didn't use it, is because they're scared. They're scared of Trump's mob. It's that plain and simple. Maybe this guy is a Republican trying to put, Trump in a good light. But it's posted January 6th. And it's monetized. So he's got a bunch of views. But he's wrong. This is where YouTube shouldn't let this kind of stuff go on, but they do. Here is Rachel Maddow. There's a URL at the top. She's illustrating what weenies the Democrats are. There is the date. It was posted on January 6th. This is going to jump right to where she's making the point.
Never the twain shall meet. In a democratic country, those things are supposed to be separate. And so today, January 6th, the certification of the last presidential election happened in Washington, and it just happened ministerially and ceremonially like it's supposed to. And that contrast with what happened today versus what happened 4 years ago makes clear the profound difference between the two parties, right? Had Democrats won the presidential election this year, the whole country openly expected and was preparing for Republicans to go into violent, if not armed, revolt. But because instead Republicans won, everyone expected, and in fact we saw today, that Democrats would peacefully accept and participate in the transfer of power. And when a whole country expects guaranteed violence if one side loses in an electoral contest, then the two political parties in that contest are no longer competing in democratic terms anymore. One of those parties is a small d and capital D Democratic Party. The other party is something else. So that is part of what we are contending with on this January 6th. How do we ever get our democracy back now? Because we have, in effect, lost it. How do we ever get back to competition in democratic terms? Which means specifically, how do we get the Republican Party and the Trumpist right to no longer see physical force and armed conflict as the way they're going to get their way and hold power?
Answer: you don't. Once you've let them become domestic terrorists and they see that you cower and it works, it will always be the case until we take over with law and start jailing these people, removing them from Congress by quo warranto, holding to account for their oaths of office and to the Constitution and the true rule of law. We don't. You've let them become the power grabbers. And that's why Congress made a huge mistake today in allowing Trump, who is constitutionally ineligible, to become the actual president-elect. Now, Quo Warrento is still there to start dismantling all this. But until the country gets its head out of its butt and sees there is no way to stop this but to stop this, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen, Rachel. Here is Lawrence O'Donnell with his preach of how we should never forget. It's rather disgusting. Because when, people will not enforce the Constitution, you lose all credibility. Don't even talk about rule of law, democracy, what you saved, Kamala Harris being, the peaceful transfer of power queen and all this other stuff. There's a URL at the top. I'm not even going to play a single word of this. Go watch it yourself. There's the title. There's the date it was posted. Okay, here's Jessica Denson. Of course, that's her on the left. Where she's interviewing a constitutional scholar. His name will show up on the clip. The sad thing about all of this is, and this is being recorded on the eve of January 6th, is that the people who know how this works aren't doing anything. They haven't done anything. And in the end, Mr. Trump would be installed. His votes will be counted, and then he would be sworn in, illegitimately. And this is a time when I don't want to hear any more crap about rule of law. The sad reality is, people don't know how to read the Constitution. They don't know how to read the rule of law. They just want to make up something of their own. And Jessica is also sadly stuck in the trap of the adjudicated insurrectionist. I don't know who first coined the phrase. I think it was Nancy Pelosi who used the phrase insurrection, and then it stuck. But that is not what happened. That is not legally what has the power against Mr. Trump. Had people simply used the Constitution, had people simply said he's violating Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, the whole national narrative would be different. So anyway, this jumps right to the section where she's discussing this with her guest, who is saying exactly what the argument is correctly, that people don't understand the Constitution. Now, sadly, Jessica Denson's not a lawyer, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. As they say, bless her heart. There's the URL at the top. You can stop at the part where there's an ampersand T equals, and all the rest of that behind that is URL garbage. And you can go watch the whole thing yourself. Jessica Denson has her own YouTube channel now. She was once with the Midas Touch Network. Midas Touch basically threw her off because they didn't want to keep talking about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Because Marcellus and Pol Pot don't understand it. They don't get it. They think the Supreme Court has ruled it out of existence, and they haven't.
That duty requires them to stand up and protect and defend the Constitution, and now more than ever, that duty calls.
Absolutely, and I want to touch on that. Even taking the election results at face value, and there's many of Americans who have rightful concerns that we did not do our election hygiene in this election, and that is another shame, but a discussion we won't bring here. But taking election results at face value, I just want to address, and again, this is a conversation I fleshed out in countless interviews on the Midas Touch Network, which, by the way, I was the one that brought the disqualification conversation to the Midas Touch Network with the lawyers from Crew and Professor Tribe, which they failed to inform their viewers of. But I had these conversations with them countless times about how, when Section 3 was drafted, it took into account that an insurrection may be elected by a majority, not to mention the actual percentage of eligible voters we're dealing with that actually voted for Trump in this election, if the numbers are right, is about 33%. So it's a small number. It's not a majority by a stretch. But even if an insurrection is elected by a majority, that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is a constitutional backstop to safeguard our republic from someone who has zero allegiance to upholding it.
Yes, and in fact, if you think about the qualifications that are in the Constitution to be president of the United States, this is probably the most important, right? I mean, you could imagine a 25-year-old who somehow is allowed to be on the ballots in every state, wins the electoral college vote, wins the popular vote, and we'd be having a conversation about how that qualification is being ignored and the Constitution is being ignored with that person coming into the Oval Office. But there's plenty of 25-year-olds, frankly, who I don't think will be a threat to our democracy. This particular provision is designed to protect the republic when someone has taken an oath of office and then engaged in insurrection, precisely because they will very likely do it again if they're back in office. And that's why the framers of the 14th Amendment were intent after the Civil War in not allowing those who had incited that first insurrection in our nation's history, the Civil War, and had been in the Confederacy, to come back into power. So that's why we have that provision in the Constitution. It's designed to protect the republic. But even if, this was about a 25-year-old, we would need to be saying the same thing. Either we accept that we have a Constitution that's the supreme law of the land, or we do not. And if we accept that that Constitution is what needs to be followed, then it needs to be followed in all instances, whether it's an age qualification, natural born citizenship qualifications, or this qualification of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Okay, John, before I let you go, I have to have you once again with me be redundant on this issue of the 2/3 requirement to remove the disability. The Out of Touch Network I've been referencing continuously is telling their viewers that a 2/3 vote of Congress is required to make Donald Trump an insurrectionist. Here is Section 3 in front of us. It says Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such a disability. Can you clarify this? Is this logic being, or non-logic being proposed, not in fact the direct opposite of the requirement of Section 3?
It is not a statement, frankly, that is credible coming from anyone who claims to have a knowledge of the Constitution and being a constitutional lawyer. So I don't think these statements are, frankly, coming from people who are constitutional scholars or lawyers. But any plain reading of that text and any scholarship of the 14th Amendment makes clear that the purpose of that language in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was to allow Congress to provide amnesty for people who were already disqualified.
They're talking about Midas Touch.
Insurrection after the Civil War, but also applied to any future insurrection. So it allows Congress to vote 2/3 to provide amnesty. So if Congress were today to go ahead and pass an amnesty bill for Donald Trump, they would need 2/3 of the vote of the House and the Senate to do that. And then that would wipe the slate clean for Donald Trump. That amnesty bill would take precedence over the rulings from Colorado, from Maine, and Illinois. But we don't have that amnesty bill pending in Congress. There has been no effort to provide an amnesty, and he's not even sought that amnesty, which is what a lot of Confederates sought after the Civil War, and in some cases won. But the inverse is not true. 2/3 is not required to find him disqualified. It's solely required to provide an amnesty. What's only required to provide him disqualified, frankly, is a majority vote on an objection to the votes being regularly given with respect to electoral college account.
Now, that's the only spot he hits where he's wrong. There is no majority vote required because the Supreme Court has said that the bar to office attaches on conduct alone. There's no objection needing to be sustained to declare him disqualified, because you can't have both. Now, an objection to Mr. Trump would be a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment objection. All objections to Mr. Trump would be Section 3 of the 14th Amendment objections, where he has violated the Constitution or a congressional law. And again, there is no 1/5 majority, 1/5 majority of both houses required to sustain that. That is an unconstitutional provision in the ECRA of 2022. I don't like people who talk with their hands, who start flailing their hands all over the place, which basically is an indication of a mental inability to comprehend what they're trying to say. So they start emphasizing it by flailing their hands all around. Now, you don't see Mr. Boniface doing that, but you see Jessica Denson doing that. Now, I'm not here to criticize Jessica Denson, but that's just crazy. That shows how crazy you are. She's frustrated. Midas Touch Network has this completely backwards. They threw her off their network. And Midas Touch, with nearly 4 million subscribers, is the biggest disservice on the internet. They are the huge misinformation network that is out there. They might as well be working for the Republicans. And for all we know, some of these businesses that are advertising on Midas Touch are Republicans. And so, they keep presenting this anti-Section 3 of the 14th Amendment narrative. And it's wrong. And she's trying to say it's wrong, but she doesn't know how to say it's wrong, so she starts flailing her hands all over the place. Now, Mr. Boniface doesn't do that. The only reason she's here in this video is because she had Mr. Boniface on. Now, a documentary doesn't need to show a face. It just needs to tell the facts. And Ms. Denson is just a huge distraction, flailing her hands all about and, speaking in pitches up and down, where Mr. Boniface is telling it like it is, just plain and simple. So, there's a clip of Jessica Denson on Mark Thompson's show. I think I can find that next, where she says, Congress doesn't have any appetite for this. And who to blame is Congress, because they're scared. They're scared if they disqualify Trump that somebody's going to jump out of the weeds and shoot them on their way home or whatever. They're scared. They're just not going to do their job. But here's the thing. If you install an illegitimate president, there's a law for that too. And Congress has already passed it, and it's quo warranto. It could easily end up before a district judge in the D.C. District Federal Court. And she keeps referencing, Crew and, Donald Sherman and Noah Bookbinder and the Colorado case. And the truth is, they brought that case ass backwards. They brought it in the wrong court, under the wrong theory of law, using the wrong set of evidence, and there is proof existing that they were told they were doing it wrong. They ignored that and they kept going. And then the Supreme Court told them they did it wrong. Now the funny thing is, the Supreme Court really didn't have jurisdiction. And so they took jurisdiction of the most narrow portion that they could to interpret the Constitution, saying that a state could not adjudicate insurrection for a federal candidate. And on that, they may be right. I say maybe because, anybody who has a law degree should know the separation of supremacy. And if there's a federal question in a state adjudication, then you must take it into federal court. State court cannot decide a federal question. And that's the fundamental place where they screwed up. It was a federal question. Is he an insurrectionist at a federal level? It had to go into a federal court. And it was up to them to know that it had to go into the D.C. District Federal Court. And while it may be under quo warranto, you can use quo warranto to determine that he has no right to hold office. That's where the insurrection argument belonged. But it wasn't insurrection. It was never insurrection. It was rebellion. It was rebellion to the Constitution. That easily determined that he had no right to hold office. So let's finish up with Mr. Boniface. He's wrong on that last point.
On January 6th, that's what would be required. And, look, I understand some of your listeners might say, well, where's that majority vote going to happen from? That I'm not really going to focus on that right now. That's not the point. The point is, can we at least have some courageous members of Congress to stand up and defend the Constitution for history's sake, for the sake of broadening the narrative here that somehow we're going to ignore the Constitution because an election occurred. That's really what this is about. And let's let the chips fall where they may. If a majority vote is not there, then every member of Congress who voted against the Constitution will have them on record.
On record.
That's how they vote.
And by the way, John, if it goes back to this compromised Supreme Court, they will be on the record too. Put them on the record. Put
Correct.
Everybody on the record as to where they stood in this moment. And like you said, let the chips fall where they may after we do the right thing.
Correct. Absolutely. That's what it's about. It's about standing up for our Constitution, our democracy at this critical moment in our history.
Absolutely. John, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
And it's very sad. Mr. Boniface is right. And This is January 5th right now. So I have no idea what Congress is going to do. But I know at this point, blame the Democrats. You have to blame the Democrats because they are the weenies who won't stand up. I can appreciate they want to take home a safe $175,000 a year. They don't want somebody coming at them, speeding at them with a truck, to run them down. They don't want somebody shooting them because the country's full of crazies. And our law enforcement has let it go on. And in some places, the law enforcement actually supports it. And in some places, it is the law enforcement. And in many cases, the military, our own military, has trained these people. And it doesn't matter if it's a bomb in a Cybertruck outside of Las Vegas Trump Hotel, or speeding into a crowd in Louisiana. These were not foreigners. These were domestic terrorists. And the biggest problem we have is that Mr. Trump lies about everything. And people just eat it up. They just accept it. Because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that someone came across the border with a truck. And that it's an illegal immigrant. There's really nothing that can be said. Because our craziness of America has become stupid. Americans are stupid. The ones who want democracy are too slow and dim-witted to push for it. Mr. Boniface is sitting there saying the issue. Is he doing anything? No. Don't know if he's an attorney. But, going on Jessica Denson's show is not the answer. Although it would be if he had a plan, if he was trying to do something. And Jessica Denson organizes a march that, as far as I know, fell flat on its face. So let's see if her on Mark Thompson, and then Mark Thompson also has on Richard Green, and then he has on somebody else who just completely gets it wrong. Let's see if we can get those clips in here also. Here is Jessica Denson on the Mark Thompson show. There's a URL up at the top there. Anything beyond the ampersand T equals 1200, you can leave off to get to the main full podcast. There's the full title, and it was posted January 2nd. This jumps to a point where an argument is being made.
Insane. I just want to tell, your viewers know this, my viewers know this. People are so disengaged right now. They are so feel completely let down by Democratic leaders who were telling us, believe me, I promoted the hell out of Kamala Harris in spite of some real qualms I had, in particular with the policy in the Middle East. This is unforgivable what's going on right there right now. But I promoted the hell out of her because I understood that our choice was binary. And she went out on the trail and said, this man someone who said they want to terminate the Constitution cannot take an oath to it again. She said hard work is good work. Where is that hard work? Where is that spine and that fight from these people, as you said, who have been so unambiguous up until November 5th? And I just want to put this out there, and so many people in my group that have put together 14th Now have this sentiment, like, we're not going to be there for you next time you need us. And I don't even have to speak for myself. I'm speaking for the masses. You have completely lost people, and they are looking for that fight peacefully. Of course, a million times peacefully. They are looking for that leadership, and they will get behind it. But you damn well better show it, and you better show it now, because you're running out of time.
Yeah, it's disheartening in the extreme to see that there's so little fight to the Democrats. It was really, I mean, I understand they feel, many of them, as though it was a legitimate election and they got thumped. And so they don't want to go over the ashes of that thumping. Although, let's face it, the weeks following the election were populated with nothing but podcasts from high-profile Democrats and Democratic strategists talking about what they could have done differently, what they could, the messaging problem, running the campaign of joy, all of this kind of thing. So on some level, they are going through the ashes, but it seems as though they're overlooking one huge, huge element here, which is that there might have been some real questions as to the election's legitimacy.
100%. And if you just think about that, Mark, you think about how Republicans and MAGA, their number one MO is projection, right? And they did this massive, comical, totally out of bounds show in 2020 about a stolen election, right? It was so exaggerated that it got to the point of a deadly insurrection on our Capitol. They so stained the conversation about election integrity and election security that we can never have a legitimate conversation about it again. Think about how dangerous that is. And that's where Democrats have allowed themselves to land, to be so gaslit by that they cannot even have a conversation. Extremely dangerous.
Great take, because that's exactly what's going on. You can just see it. They don't want to be like them. And so we're not going to be like they are. We're going to hand over the reins of power. We're not going to say that the election was illegitimate. Guys, if it was illegitimate, you have to call it out as such. I mean, it's so strange how we have moved into this world which has turned everything on its side and made this it kind of given it a radioactivity, so they just don't want to go near it. It's utterly crazy. I want to get back, though, quickly to now.
So, at one point she says flat out, of all the congressional people she's contacted, no one has an appetite for enforcing the Constitution. No one isn't going to object. And that's the experience that is seen in the media. There's the Political article that says they're not going to object. Jamie Raskin says he's afraid of the Trump mob, that they'll all need bodyguards. So the coup has happened. They've taken over the federal government by fear. And I can't say what I would do. They just want to take home their $175,000 a year and not get killed. And, the country has let this racism and rebellious attitude get so far out of control. There's a question as to just how many law enforcement people would actually do their job. How many of them are actually infected also? How much of law enforcement is really Trump supporters? And, this belief about MAGA, Make America Great Again, they all want the ideal scenario to be where America's all white, all Caucasian people only. And that's not really able to happen. However, when you look at the founding of America, this was a land populated by Native Americans, aka the American Indians. They came over here and just basically exterminated everyone. They just started killing Indians left and right. If they weren't shooting them, they were infecting them with disease. And, the American Indians had no resistance to things like smallpox, diphtheria, rubella, and they were dying. So now the assimilation is complete. The American Indian is now forced into small pockets of reservations around the country that is pretty much unwanted land. And now it's come full circle. The Civil War is back, and they've won. They're going to dismantle much of the American government, and the Democrats are going to sit there with their fingers up their butt. And they're going to be like, you can't do that. This isn't happening. You can't do that. And the Republicans aren't going to hear a thing they got to say. They're just going to keep right on going. And that's where Democrats have no spine. First of all, they should not have let Trump be reelected. They should not have let him stay on the ballot. It would have been just as easily done to go immediately into D.C. District Federal Court and get an order in quo warranto, preemptive order of quo warranto, that until he gets an amnesty ruling from Congress, he can't run. That was the proper place to get it done. Nobody did that. Trump's MO is to keep things such a mess, such chaos, that you can't think of anything else. This whole few weeks leading up to January 6th has been about keep chaos in the air so nobody stops to talk about his constitutional ineligibility. So no one has a plan to have it actually wait on him to make January 6th disqualification day. And it's worked. So, there's a Mark Thompson show with Richard Green. And then there's another one guest. I forget his name. But I'm just going to play short clips of those because Richard Green says that Congress could vote to remove constitutional requirements like age and citizenship, could let AOC run for president. Of course, he's nuts. They can't vote to remove a constitutional requirement. They can only vote to remove the disability created by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And this guy is allegedly an attorney. So, things are not looking good. This is a clip from Mark Thompson's show where he has on a guest, Richard Green, calls himself the civics dean. And I'm going to jump right to 3 minutes in where I believe Mr. Green says something not true. Now, he is a little bit eccentric. Here's the full title: Congress has the power to block. This is based on the Hill article once again. And it was posted December 31st.
Really address that. We can talk about that. And it would be exactly like the United States Congress certifying the election of someone who was 27 years old, or someone like Elon Musk, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was not born in the United States, or someone who had not been a resident of the United States for 14 years. And that's it. Those are the only requirements up until 1868. And in 1868, 30 years after James Madison's death, the 14th Amendment was created, and in relevant part in Section 3, it says, no person shall hold any office under the United States who, having previously taken an oath, and what is the oath for? The oath is to obey the Constitution of the United States, as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. That's it. That is a requirement. So you have to be at least 35, you have to be a natural-born citizen, you have to have been a resident of the United States for 14 years, and you can't have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States Constitution.
So, is there any? Yeah, you're saying, look, it's open and shut. I love your examples, which it's like any violation of the Constitution. Now, as noted in our chat, I think along the way, if this isn't enforced by, well, Congress is really the body that's charged with enforcing it, then it goes through, and Congress, cowed completely by Trump and having gained power. I mean, if you're in the GOP, your guy won. So, I mean, you sort of have an interest, it would seem, a vested interest in seeing him sworn in regardless.
Yeah, now, there are two things that can happen. One is Congress could take care of this very simply under the 14th Amendment and be in compliance with the Constitution, because at the end of Section 3 it says, but Congress may by a vote of 2/3 of each house, that's the House and the Senate, remove such disability. So, for example, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was elected president at the age of 30...
This is where he starts the wrong crap. Let's keep going.
She could still be president if Congress, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, voted to remove such disability. Most people don't talk about that. So Elon Musk could be president if 2/3 of Congress votes to remove such disability. So that is unlikely that would happen, because...
Except that doesn't apply. Congress cannot vote to relieve a requirement in the Constitution. They can only vote to relieve the bar to office disability created by a transgression of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as an insurrectionist or in rebellion to the Constitution or congressional laws thereof. Rebellion being defined at 18 U.S.C. 2383. And so the reason people don't talk about that is because you're wrong. You're flat out wrong. And this is where, unfortunately, people like Mark Thompson, with no law degree, he doesn't know that he's just been gaslit by someone who's got it completely wrong. Now I'm going to go, you can see this is only 6 minutes and 47 seconds in. I'm going to go for just a few more seconds and see what else he says. You saw the URL before we launched into it. You can go back if you want to, and then you can go find this and listen to the entire interview if you like.
You would have some Republicans who, are not going to allow one thing, or Democrats who are not going to allow the other. The other thing that's interesting is under the 20.
Except the problem is, Republicans and Democrats don't have anything to do with this. What has to do with it, and has to do with it only, is the 2/3 majority required to overcome the bar to office disability. That's it. The Republicans have 2/3 control of both houses, then they can stop it. If they don't, then the minority of the Democrats can stop it. Can stop Trump from being certified. It can force his votes to be set aside. And quite frankly, I think he's about to talk about the ECRA of 2022, where it says you need 20% or 1/5 both houses to levy the objection. That's not true. Regarding a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation, it would only take one person making an absolute formal Section 3 of the 14th Amendment violation identification by conduct, public record thereof, and the exact article, clause, and section violated or congressional law violated, and that would activate the bar to office. No one else need do anything. And the Supreme Court has said this, as I've said in other videos and here. It says it activates on conduct and nothing more. The bar to office activates on conduct and nothing more, where you violate the oath you took.
The 2022 revision to the Electoral Count Act, you need 20% of the House to put forth an objection.
That's the
to
1/5
any slate of electors. So how this could go down if there was slightly a different composition of the House or Senate is that someone would stand up and say, I object to Texas.
No. He's wrong. If you read the ECRA of 2022, it requires 1/5, which is 20%, of the members of both houses to sign the same written objection. There is no standing up and objecting. Someone could stand up and call for a point of order. Being Donald Trump is constitutionally ineligible. Not that he's an adjudicated insurrectionist, but that he's constitutionally ineligible. Now, someone could call for that as a point of order and identify the article, section, and clause of the Constitution. That means he would only get one. But with regard to an objection that he's talking about here, that has to be in writing. It has to be signed by all those members. Nobody can just pop up and say it. That's why the ECRA of 2022 was revised, because that's what people were doing, popping up and saying it. And so, it's embarrassing. This guy's supposedly an attorney in California. And you just get out there and you say the wrong stuff. This is what is not helping America at all. Now, the good news is behind this is sadpac.com has figured it out properly. If Trump is sworn in, he can be sued in quo warranto. It doesn't matter who is in the DOJ. The DOJ is supposed to do it first. But when the DOJ refuses, then private citizens can file in quo warranto under DC Code 163501. And a jury of 12 people could actually remove Trump. There'd be no impeachment, nothing that has to do with that. Now, a judge could do it without a jury. And you want to know where the appeal then is supposed to go on a Section 3 of the 14th Amendment adjudication violation? You got it. Back to to Congress for a 2/3 vote to remove such disability. So it's not over. This is the 5th of January. It's not over tomorrow. It could be brought right back up again by a lawsuit, at which point he will need 2/3 vote of both houses to remove that adjudicated rebellion disability that is the bar to office. There are just so many people that get on these podcasts and don't have a I'm not going to say it, F clue of what they're talking about.
The 40 electoral votes for Donald Trump being counted because they were not cast, the electors did not cast these votes in proper manner because they voted for someone who is not capable of being president of the United States. It then goes...
Meaning constitutionally ineligible. That's the word that the Supreme Court said in the first paragraph of the Trump v. Anderson. Constitutionally ineligible. They never said he was not constitutionally ineligible. In fact, they did say he was constitutionally ineligible when they declared that Section 3 activates on the conduct and nothing more. The bar to office activates on the conduct and nothing more. Everybody who tried to read that order is so mad. They read all this dicta and they read all this other stuff about legislation required that they just went off on a tangent saying, the Supreme Court's screwing us. No, the Supreme Court was right. It's just that they screwed you with confusing language. It didn't make it clear. They didn't intend to make it clear. They intended to make it look like an abomination that they did. What they should have said was, this is regarding state power only. Only. That Congress still retains all their other powers. And it does say that. It says that in a way that you just have to read the jump around of the order. The Binkley brief in Trump v. Anderson is where likely much of this theory in the Trump v. Anderson order of March 4th, 2024 came from. And they say, the Binkley brief says, cites to DC Code 163501. It says after he's elected, you can remove him. Well, a jury could find that yes, he's constitutionally ineligible. And then the appeal, either Trump resigns or there's an appeal. And it's not to the Supreme Court of the United States. It is to Congress to vote on the constitutional ineligibility, and which requires 2/3 vote. And if he doesn't reach that 2/3 vote to relieve that disability, some calling it amnesty, he's out. Now let's see what other craziness Richard Green, the civics dean, is saying.
Goes to a vote, a majority vote of both houses.
Not a majority.
And then if the majority says, yes, we agree with that objection, then Donald Trump doesn't get those 40 electoral college votes of Texas.
That's not how it works. That's the old way it works. If Trump is constitutionally ineligible, he's ineligible to receive any electoral votes. You don't talk about just Texas. You don't talk about peeling off a state here, a state there. If he's ineligible to receive any votes as not regularly given.
And so on and so on. He only needs to be stripped of enough electoral college votes to get below Kamala Harris's 236.
Sure.
If they stripped him of enough to get below 236, Kamala Harris would be the next president of the United States, not J.D. Vance.
That's wild. This is just it's a wild.
Now, he's correct. It's not J.D. Vance. But he's incorrect. If Trump is constitutionally ineligible, he gets none of his electoral votes. And then Kamala Harris becomes the president. Now, let's see what Mark Thompson has to say, because obviously he's kind of clueless. But at least he's not stupid. This guy's got a good-sized head. He thinks.
Scenario. It feels very John Grisham novel. It feels very, it's, even though...
Oh, don't start. Don't start with these metaphors, because you don't know what to say, because you're Richard Green, the civics dean, is partly correct, but he's just got his analysis wrong. Here is the January 1st edition of Anthony Davis's Wednesday weekly uncovered interview with Ron Filipkowski. Ron Filipkowski is the so-called editor-in-chief at Midas Touch. And he is the only Midas Touch person I really will watch, because the rest of them are clueless. You got Professor, who swallows his words and chokes on them, can't seem to meter his speech so that, he's not choking on words. And then you got the old guy who gets everything wrong. He talks about it like, like he's sitting in a bar somewhere, and neither one of them are doing anything. They're just collecting the advertising money generated by Google from the 4 million subscribers. Not doing America any favors. Here is, that's the title of it, and here's the date it was posted. If this thing will slide up, January 1st. And it's a Midas Touch network show, but Ron Filipkowski, who's in the middle there, is the only guy that really thinks strategically. And I don't know how Filipkowski and Mycelis and Popak all came together, but Filipkowski would be smart to just get a couple of other people rather than these two. Midas Touch has become the tattletale network. All they do is tattletale. Look what Trump did now. Look what Trump did now. Look what he's happening now. Look what's happening. And the bottom line is Jessica Denson was right. They should have stuck with the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Analysis and violation by Trump. They could have just as easily caused an uprising in the nation that would make Congress reject Trump. Congress doesn't understand, but maybe they could have been educated that it doesn't take a majority. It just takes the minority that will keep the 2/3 majority from being reached in both houses. And in this interview here, you're welcome to go listen to the whole thing. There's a point where Ron Filipkowski says, basically, Democrats are stupid. He doesn't say they're stupid. He says so few Democrats understand this. It's a nice way of saying they don't, and he says they don't think strategically. It's a nice way of saying they're stupid. Because, they're looking at it head on for right now, and that's what he says. Whereas instead of thinking strategically down the road, we're getting nowhere. That's why, right now, today, they're talking about peaceful transfer of power. Yeah, BS. Peaceful transfer of power to those who are going to destroy the country. So this splash here is probably the best. You got Trump on the left there, ready to tear up the country. You got Philip Kowski, who's thinking, and you got Anthony Davis in the background, who's not unlikable. He's just not likable. So this is going to jump right to where they're talking about how Biden failed the country appointing Merrick Garland, as reported by the Washington Post.
Here we go.
Yeah.
This is the
They have
definition
to
of a cult.
entertain it because he's
They have to
lost.
entertain it. Listen, we have to finish in a minute, but I want to end on this story from the Washington Post about Joe Biden, his opinion on the appointment of Merrick Garland. Let me read this little line here. The Washington Post reporting that Joe Biden now admits that he should have chosen someone other than Merrick Garland for Attorney General because he simply wasn't the man for the moment and was far too slow to appoint Special Counsel Jack Smith, all but ensuring that Trump would not be held accountable for his crimes before the election. He also noted that Garland wasted no time appointing a special counsel to aggressively prosecute Hunter Biden.
About 4 years too
But
late.
this is a frustrating bone of contention, isn't it? Because we all felt it, and we all put our trust in Merrick Garland being a good person on the right side of history, doing the right thing with an awful lot of experience. And that was all bullshit. It seemed that even Joe Biden was feeling what we were feeling all along.
Yeah, you don't know who to believe on this stuff. About all this Monday morning quarterbacking. But yeah, I mean, what the story reported was that he wanted to appoint Doug Jones. He wanted to appoint the former Alabama senator who was a civil rights prosecutor way back in the day,
Right.
And so that's who he wanted to appoint, who probably would have been very, very aggressive, who was politically savvy, who had been in the Senate, all that kind of stuff, right? And that's who he wanted. And he was talked out of it by Ron Klain, his chief of staff, who felt like, what Biden wanted, according to the report, is somebody who had some political savvy to him and who had been in Congress or the Senate, somebody who knew the players and stuff like that, because he felt like that's what was necessary, was sort of a hybrid prosecutor politician was needed.
And we should remember that Merrick Garland missed the opportunity to be on the Supreme Court because
Right, which is
Mitch
where
McConnell
where he
blocked that
belonged.
the last time, and so there was
That was
maybe
a perfect job for him.
right. So there was a sense of onus that maybe he didn't get that, so maybe he
Right.
should have the next best job.
He got left holding the bag and all that, right?
Right.
So I think that was part of it. But then you have Ron Klain, who had the exact opposite take on it, which he felt like he wanted somebody completely not connected to politics whatsoever. So it was perfect to take a judge, who's very vanilla, who's very straight arrow, no skeletons, not non-political, that he felt like after coming out of 4 years of the Trump Justice Department, which had politicized DOJ and federal law enforcement, that we didn't go in the opposite direction to restore the credibility of the Department of Justice. Now, that's admirable. I get it. I mean, I can understand that part of it.
But he picked the wrong period of history to do
But
that.
yeah, you hit it. Yeah, you said it. Took the
And
words right out of my mouth.
Well, it's a no-brainer. The CHIPS Act was a no-brainer. The Infrastructure Act's a no-brainer. If you know anything about putting people back to work, if you know anything about the chips industry, if you know who ASML is, you know that they licensed that machine. And because the region in Taiwan there had gotten so volatile, it was time to pull that machine out of the area of China. Pull it out of the side of the country of Taiwan. Pull it away from anything Chinese Chinese and Taiwanese are just kissing cousins. And that's really where the CHIPS Act came from. ASML promised to modify their license so that that machine could not be in Taiwan anymore. And so, they basically they agreed to change the license such that it could only be in a few countries, one being the United States. They would not license it to the Chinese, China itself proper. And because China was making grumblings about invading Taiwan, they would rather have seen the U.S. military send missiles to TSMC, blow the whole plant up, rather than the Chinese get their hands on that equipment. So that was a no-brainer. Joe Biden didn't have to do anything there. Except, somebody in his administration put together the bill. Biden didn't do it. Biden's been an old bum for a long time. And he may have been the right man for the job to beat Trump only because James Clyburn supported him in South Carolina, which is where he came out with all of a sudden with the primary win. And I don't know that that was a good thing. Was the old guard supporting the old guard? The problem, the baggage that Biden carried, the quiet, the unkept thing that nobody talks about, is he secretly hated in the Senate and by Republicans because he was Obama's vice president. They were like, no, and no. You were Obama's vice president. So that carries some deep wounds. And here we are, 2025, January 5th, 2025. Tomorrow, the joint session will do whatever the joint session does. Barring a court flying in saying you must take a vote on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, they're going to just ignore the Constitution and skip right over it and just count the votes like nothing ever happened. That leaves the door open for Trump to be quo warranted, sued as an illegitimate president. The funny thing is, the law is that an ordinary jury can decide his guilt. 12 ordinary citizens. Now, the Republicans would jump up and down and say you can't do that. But the Binkley brief in the Trump v. Anderson case, which I encourage anyone to read, it's listed in one of the previous videos, shows that's exactly what it's intended for. Any officer of the United States, any officer, that could be Supreme Court, that can be Senate, House of Representatives, other officers, including the President and Vice President, can be quo warranted if they indeed have done something in violation of their oath of office or the Constitution. And Trump's got over 20 things he's done in violation of the Constitution. But the biggest thing would be is that he would now have been installed as an illegitimate president because he never sought the amnesty that Mr. can't remember his name now from the previous clip said he needed to apply for. Now let's close with one of the biggest sellouts in Congress. Mr. Raskin is supposed to be a constitutional law professor. He is full of it. He wants to talk about the Constitution, but only those parts that they have enough fortitude to enforce. Kamala Harris certified the election by counting the votes. And now Mr. Raskin wants to talk about national popular vote, although he just doesn't say national popular vote. And then he doesn't put forward a plan on how to get it done, when the way to get it done is the only way to get it done. You know, because right now it's sitting at almost done. But the way to get it done is with the states that allow constitutional amendment by ballot initiatives, which would be Arizona, Missouri, Ohio, Florida, Michigan. Oklahoma also allows it. To have the national popular vote on the ballot to modify the constitution of that state to change the manner of choosing electors to national popular vote. Then the National Popular Vote Compact would be activated, although it has some legal problems. The states that simply enacted it by legislature could at any time change their legislative stance on manner of choosing electors in a National Popular Vote Compact, except for those states that do it by constitutional amendment. Nevada's another one. If national popular vote becomes the law of the land, well, there'll be no more battleground states. But for right now, Raskin and all of the Democrats could have simply called for the amnesty vote required by the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. He's talking about "We'll Never Forget." That's the title of this video. We won't forget. Yeah, BS. You've already forgotten. This was posted January 6th. You've already forgotten. You've forgotten that Mr. Trump is constitutionally ineligible to hold office. You know, stop talking about the officers and all this other BS. If you're going to enforce the Constitution, enforce it. Otherwise, you're the biggest hypocrite on the hill, because you get up on TV and, or, you know, visual media, and you talk BS. Because you're not enforcing, supporting, and defending the Constitution. Because the Constitution says, and the Supreme Court again has said, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment activates the bar to office on conduct and nothing more. So Trump is barred from taking office. Now, I don't expect Justice Roberts will refuse to swear him in, although that's what he should do if he's going to support the Constitution and the order that he just wrote, March 4th, 2024, that says Trump is constitutionally ineligible. It says the Congress is supposed to take care of that. What did they do? They just ignored it like it was another day, normalized it, counted the votes. The votes that are null. The votes that cannot be counted. And they don't understand. So, this is going to jump to the section where he's talking about national popular vote. Let's see what he has to say.
It marginalizes the vast majority of the American people. It's very weird. We've gotten conditioned to it, but strange to have a presidential election that comes down immediately to 6 or 7 states, and everybody else is just watching what happens in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona. Why don't we have an election for president like an election for representative or senator or mayor or governor? Whoever gets the most votes wins. And you don't have to have a vice president who's in the race, whether that's Kamala Harris or I remember Al Gore was in the same situation.
See, Raskin fills time with BS words. Instead of just getting right to the point, the national popular vote is close to being enacted. Here's what we need to do to finish it. In the midterms, we need to put this on the ballot in the states where it allows constitutional amendments and finish this so that next time, if Donald Trump wins the popular vote, well, not that he can run again, there won't be any question. But you also have to look at the fact that a lot of people just stay home because they know their vote doesn't really matter. People in California, California's going to go blue no matter what. So people don't bother to vote. They stay home. Why would you want to go stand in line? Although in California you don't have to stand in line. You can mail in your vote. But why would you bother when your vote isn't going to matter for president? It's the votes of these 7 states where Kamala Harris lost by only 230,000 votes. But that's another story for another day because the Democrats ran the wrong candidate. They ran the candidate who would have failed at any primary ever. They forced this Hillary 2.0 on the country, and we got a Hillary 2.0 outcome. Not only that, Harris was worse than Hillary because she dodged questions. She wouldn't clearly answer them. She gave these spaghetti brain answers. She's biracial and, frankly, of small stature that America, just on that alone, is not going to vote for her. They're not going to elect her. She's so-called Jamaican, Indian, Caucasian. That's what it says on her birth certificate. And it was probably the dumbest move ever in the history of politics. So let's listen to Raskin just a little bit further.
Or Richard Nixon was in that situation counting the electoral college votes, and people don't even understand it anymore. Like our Republican colleagues today, they were cheering and stomping their feet and acting like it was the Republican National Convention. Our job there was just to be counting the votes, but people don't fundamentally understand it, and it's time for...
And apparently you don't understand it either. Your job was to count the regularly given votes, in which case there were none, because Donald Trump is constitutionally ineligible. As the Supreme Court said, due his conduct in violating his oath, trying to stay in power, violating Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1. You are the one and your Democratic weenie friends who don't understand it. Let's listen to more BS from Raskin. Just stay home. Don't.
Refresh, and I think this is a good opportunity to do it. I mean, Donald Trump, he's very proud of the fact that he won the popular vote by 3 million votes, the way that Joe Biden was proud of the fact that he won by 7 million votes 4 years ago. Okay, why don't we all agree just to have a popular vote for election and move away from a dangerous and manipulable electoral college system?
Hopefully it's not always able to be manipulated, but I think a lot of people share your view on the electoral college versus the popular vote. Let me ask you about a clip. I just played the clip of the vice president. You referenced this, certifying the election, something others have done in history. Usually just normal par for the course, but feels hard to watch a bit in this moment, given the role Trump played 4 years ago. What was going through your head when you were watching?
Well, it's a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, we were there on the floor, the Democrats acting as constitutional patriots. We are demonstrating our...
BS. A constitutional patriot would have raised the question of needing to bring the amnesty vote according to the final sentence. There's only 2 sentences in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Most people don't realize that. The final sentence, which says Congress may by a 2/3 majority vote of both houses relieve such disability. The Supreme Court has declared, in Trump v. Anderson, yes, he's constitutionally ineligible, but a state may not adjudicate insurrection as to a federal candidate. That's all they said. But then they also said how Congress is really supposed to handle this. Do you think any of these people can read? No. Nobody read the order for what it really says. They're all angry and mad because, Roberts is he's a Republican appointee, and his background is racial discrimination and stopping minorities, what have you not, from voting and blah, blah, blah. But he walks a tightrope. But he writes orders in such a way that he doesn't want you to read it and understand it. But the order is clear. He says, and he did author that order, even though it says per curiam, he says, Section 3 activates on conduct and nothing more. The bar to office activates on conduct and nothing more. Meaning, no court, no charge, no indictment, no judges needed, blah, blah, blah. Except that Congress is the only place that may be enforced. They had the opportunity yesterday. Were they paid off by Elon Musk too? Did Elon Musk donate to all of their campaigns for them to keep their mouths shut? Raskin has absolutely zero credibility now. All the Democrats have zero credibility for handing over the government to Mr. Trump, the rebellious in every way incoming president who is illegitimate. The way to stop him now is quo warranto, where ordinary citizen can bring a quo warranto action in the D.C. District Federal Court after the new Attorney General, whoever that may be, refuses to do it. And then it's going to be up to a judge or 3 judges or even a jury to decide that Mr. Trump is constitutionally ineligible and that the appeal goes to and only goes to Congress for the required 2/3 majority vote from both houses to allow him to remain in office. Otherwise, he and his entire administration has to go. And Harris and the new administration would be installed. In other words, they have to correct their error of January 6th. Will that happen? Not unless American citizens get together and donate to some law firm who has the chutzpah to bring the suit. A few more minutes of Raskin's BS, and then I'm going to close. Hit like and subscribe. The like at least will keep you in the feed, and it'll help with the algorithm, because these videos are not going to end up in the mainstream feeds on YouTube unless people are watching them and hitting the like button. It's horrible the way YouTube actually works, because it gives content creators the ability to block and remove comments that are meaningful, and then yet their megaphone stays on. They can keep talking BS. And now they're all just grifting. Go to Patreon, pay me monthly. I'm going to give you this. Legion Miller, who makes a very good reporting video, she and no one else has understood Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, even though she's an attorney. And now they're all slowing down. Mark Elias is literally begging at the beginning of every single video, subscribe for $10 a month. For what? For you to be wrong and not to do anything that the Constitution says you should have done? Oh, please. So, just a few more minutes.
Fidelity to the constitutional process as it's written. And we did the right thing in that sense. But it was a very bitter pill to swallow, given that 4 years ago, when they faced electoral...
Did the right thing? No, you did not. And this is where Raskin goes on and compares it to something else. I couldn't hire him as an attorney. He doesn't know how to stay on point and stay on the argument. The URL was at the beginning of this. You can go back and watch it yourself from Jen Psaki from the beginning. She gives a long monologue in the beginning, and then has Raskin on. If I were a Democrat, I wouldn't be able to show my face on media. We did the right thing. You are so full of it, Raskin. And I think you also know why you're full of it. Because you and many others were told what you needed to do, and you said, we're not going to object because we don't want Trump's mobs.